Hello friends and foes, my name is Kate, this is my channel Chapter Kate, and today I'm going to be recommending books to Postcard. If you don't know what Postcard is, it was this art project back in the early 2000s. People would decorate these postcards and send in their deepest, darkest secrets to this address right here. And it became this huge community art project where you could go online and you could find all these postcards, and they were also collected in these books. Also, the band All American Rejects had a song called Dirty Little Secret, and in the music video for that song, a ton of these postcards were featured. I found this book at a secondhand bookstore and I was like, yes, finally I'm going to own one because I've been wanting one of these books for years. I just think it's really interesting to see what things people consider to be their deepest, darkest secrets. I don't like small talk. I like to dive right into the deep and dark stuff. So what I thought would be interesting is going through these and finding certain postcards and trying to recommend books to those people that sent those postcards without knowing anything else about them, just knowing their secret. So what I'll do is I will show you the postcard and then I'll recommend the book. This is the first one, and it basically says how much money they make teaching creative writing versus how much they make actually writing creatively, which would be zero. I know a lot of people go into the arts and are not fortunate enough to get, careers or to make income with what they're actually wanting to do. So for this one, I wanted to focus on a book that featured a writer of some sort. So I'm going to go with Nod by Adrian Barnes. The main character of this book is an etymologist, which means that he is very, very focused on the origin of certain words. And it's really, really interesting because etymology is just a really cool subject to me. I love to know where words came from. I love to know how language has evolved over time. So he also writes books about etymology. And this entire book is written sort of by him like journal entries. But the plot of this book is that one night the whole world stops being able to sleep. A select few can still sleep, and all the people that still sleep have this very specific dream. As days go on, people start experiencing the effects of going without sleep, which obviously has a really bad effect on your physical health and your mental health. The main character is one of the few people who can sleep, and he's trying to stay safe in this world that's basically going out of control because no one else can. It's pretty dark in some areas, and it reminds me a lot of George Orwell's writing. And it has a lot of commentary on basically our primal instincts, because the longer that these people go without sleep, the more that they regress into their more primal instincts. Overall, this is one of my favorite books, and I love it. Here's the next one, and it says, I am a peaceful person who happens to be filled with violent rage. And I can definitely understand that sort of contrast in how you display yourself and how you feel inside. I personally have a lot of anger, but I try to not exhibit that anger. So I can see where that person's coming from. As for a book, I'm going to go with The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. The reason for me is that the main character seems like a peaceful person, someone who wants peace, but inside they have this fire, this spirit of fighting, but inside they have this fire, this spirit of fighting that keeps them alive and protects those that they care about. So this book starts off at a war school. The main character is dark-skinned and they're from a more rural area. I have a really hard time saying that word. And so they come to this school and they are sort of an outlier and they're treated as such. But they work their way through the classes, they do what they have to do. They become stronger, they work smarter, and she has to work twice as hard as her counterparts just to have any ounce of the same respect. This book goes from elite war school to actual war pretty quick, and so the petty things that matter at the school might not matter later. However, the main character discovers this power inside them that makes them into a force to be reckoned with. The next one is this card that just says, I feel lighter. Now, the feeling of lightness is something I discuss a lot at work. We have this song that we talk about called I Am Light by India Ari, and we talk about how the word light has so many different meanings. In a lot of songs it means joy or it means clarity, but light itself can be light like the sun or it can be light like weightless. And so I liked the idea of I feel lighter and thinking about that. And of course, even though it has so many beautiful intricacies to the phrase, I went with something pretty literal, and I'm going to say Elevation by Stephen King. This is a really short novella and the only Stephen King book I've ever read. Throughout the book, the main character loses weight. They don't physically look any different, but when they measure themselves, they get lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter as the book goes on. Now, the argument can be made that they're also living lighter, so they're starting to free themselves of the inhibitions that they typically had prior to this weird phenomena where they're losing constant weight. It's a really interesting book. There's a lot of criticisms I have for it, but I do feel like it fits this particular postcard. This one says, I don't like to use foul language out loud. Instead, I write it down as many times as I can on a piece of paper whenever I feel the urge. After that, I immediately destroy the paper so no one will find it. Also, you can see that this has the F word written all over the card. I used to be like that also. I used to not use any foul language, but the writing things down repeatedly reminded me of a certain character from The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. The main character of this book is Jude. Jude has a twin sister and then an older sister who is a half-sister. When she's young, the older sister's actual biological father comes and murders their family and takes them away to Fairyland, which is just called the Land of Fairy, I believe. The man who is the biological father of their older sister, is really complicated family situation, is in a position of power in Fairy. However, Jude and her twin sister are human, and so they're trying to live in this land with these fae who are mischievous and scary and all that good stuff. And there's also this prince named Carden. Carden's a little shit. But there's this one scene where a certain character writes a certain character's name over and over and over and over and over again on this piece of paper. It's really annoying if you listen to it on audiobook. It's a little less annoying on paper, but it reminded me of that postcard. But there's a lot of political tensions, there's a lot of like fighting and like badassery and all that good stuff. This one says, I have finally spoken my secret out loud into this envelope and sealed it forever. I think the thing I like about that one is that it's unique because they don't actually put their secret on the card. Even given the anonymity of putting it on a card and sending it into this mysterious address, they didn't feel comfortable saying their secret, which means it's just that intense for them. So for this one, I would recommend The Binding by Bridget Collins. The reason I recommend this book is because in this world, there are these people who are bookbinders. And what they can do is, with your consent, they can take a memory that you tell them, write it down in a book, and then you don't have that memory anymore. So it's really great for people who have gone through serious traumas and that they don't want to remember them. However, this power can also be used for evil. People can do things to people and force them to put their secrets in a book and then they won't remember anymore. Also, they can read other people's secrets. But if the book is destroyed, that memory returns to the person. They also consider like novels to be fake because they're not real memories from people, which I thought was interesting. Another thing is that this book is written from one perspective for about half of the book and it changes perspectives halfway through, which I think is really interesting. But because they're able to put their secrets into a book and not have to deal with them anymore, it reminded me of that postcard. This is the next one and it says, when I get angry, I put bad words on my toaster strudel. And for some reason, I think the fact of putting like FU on toaster strudel is just adorable to me because it's like witty banter, but you're putting on toaster strudel, which completely defeats like any harshness to those words. And for some reason, that personality reminded me of the main character of Superheroes Anonymous by Lexi Dunn. The main character of this book is known as Hostage Girl because in her city that she lives in, all the supervillains decide to take her hostage for some reason. They're also superheroes. At the beginning of this book, she undergoes a trauma which actually leads to her having her own powers. But her personality is just full of like that witty banter that you would expect in like superhero movies or comic books or anything like that. And so someone who was always taken hostage, I can just imagine them being like throwing around curse words but being completely harmless. And so that's why the toaster strudel reminded me of this. This one says, I'm terrified of not existing. Which honestly, I can totally relate to that fear. Also, as someone who has experienced derealization, it can sometimes feel like you're not real and that the world around you is not real and that maybe you don't exist, and it's kind of really scary. So I've been in that position and I can kind of feel where that person is coming from. In this book, there are individuals who can represent big cities. However, in New York, there are these individual boroughs, and so there's a person for each one of those boroughs. There's a lot of inspiration taken from H.P. Lovecraft in this book, and these beings who represent these integral parts of the city being threatened with complete destruction and non-existence reminded me of that card. This book is really, really interesting. I would love to see it in a more visual format. I would love to see it as a movie because the way it's written is so interesting to me. I love anything where a person or a human represents an idea. And with this one, they represent an entire area. So an entire part of a city with all of its personality, with all of its culture, with all of its people. And so I find this to be so well done and so interesting to see these individuals given such a vast, I guess, existence. This one says that I smile sweetly and pretend to sympathize with my friends who are always arguing with their mothers. I would give my left arm to have my mother alive to fight with. And for this one, I'm going to recommend An Unkindness of Ghost by River Solomon. I think the blunt grief represented in that postcard reminds me of the main character of this book. Several things about that postcard reminded me of this book. For example, there's amputation, which reminds me of giving my left arm. The main character does not have their mother. Their grief for their mother is consistent throughout the book. On top of that, the main character has a hard time sympathizing with others. They have a hard time connecting with others, through facial expressions and things like that. That doesn't mean that they are not caring. They obviously care very much about the people around them. This book takes place on this spaceship that's set up very much like the antebellum South. So those with dark skin who are in the lower class are treated like garbage. they're killed, they're assaulted. So not only is this person grieving for their mother, but they're grieving for all the mothers and for all their people and the way that they're treated. And they're trying to fight against it. I've talked about this book in my recent video and I already said this, but it's a very painful book to read. The things that the character goes through and that the others in their world experience is just very, very painful. If you're a Black reader, I would caution you because this book has amazing representation. Just be careful because the content of this book can be very triggering for those that have experienced any racial violence. So just proceed with caution and know that going in. This next one says, sometimes I put coins in other people's parking meters. The thing I like about that one is that it looks super dark and scary, but it's actually just someone that's a good Samaritan who likes to be sweet. So because of that, I wanted to recommend The Assassination of Bringen. This book features an elf and a goblin. The elf is an emissary who is also kind of a spy. They're visiting the goblins and they're where they live and everything, and they're sending back information to the other elves. Now, when the elf is describing all that's going on, they send back these pictures and they're very dark and scary and graphic and But when it switches to the goblin's perspective, which is just typed, the way that they explain things is very happy and completely different than the perspective sent by the elf. And it's just very amusing to see the contrast between the two. And overall, it's just a very good little book. It's illustrated and it's just really cute. This is the last one and it says, I can't think of a secret except for that I don't think I'm interesting enough to have a secret. And for this one, I'm going to recommend The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil. This is a very interesting little graphic novel. It takes place on this, I believe it's an island, where everything is very organized, everything runs like clockwork, all the houses look the same, all the people pretty much look the same, everything goes very normally. The main character is completely bald from head to toe, except for one single hair on their chin. However, one day the hair starts growing into a magnificent beard, and over the course of the book, the beard takes on a life of its own, and it just becomes utter chaos. It affects the entire island, everything sort of falls into disarray, and it's very amusing. And it gets very existential at one point, and it mentions Eternal Flame by the Bangles, so what I did is I listened to that song on repeat the entire time I was reading it, and it definitely added to the experience. So I recommend, if you're going to read this, listen to Eternal Flame on repeat as you do so. But that is all for this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're interested in any of these books. Let me know if you knew about Post Secret or if you ever read any of Post Secret when you were growing up, because I definitely did in high school. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to let out that breath you didn't know you were holding. Bye! Tripping over shadows and I'm drowning in the night. I feel the soldiers coming and I'm putting up a fight.